Welcome once again to the Masters of the Universe Classic Director's Commentary with me, Scott, ToyGuru Neitlich, the former brand manager for most of Masters of the Universe Classics, 95% of it. And today, if you hadn't figured out from the giant clue on screen as we slowly creep up his package, today we're talking about Megator, the second oversized giant figure, and by giant I mean he actually physically not only is big, but he's a giant. That's like what he is. He's, like fee, fi, fo, fum giant kind of thing, actual giant. And we had to get to him. You know why we had to get to Megator? Because Masters of the Universe fans, well, all adult collectors, and I'm an adult collector myself, so I'm kind of throwing myself under the bus here. We need balance. We thrive on harmony and balance. We do. It's kind of this subconscious thing, this kind of yin and yang that we have to have in our toy lines. And we had already done Titus, so doing the bad guy giant was kind of a requirement. I mean, you've got things like Battle Cat versus Panther, and there's always kind of like a good and bad version of things in MOTU. I mean, the amount of grief that we received when we made both of the monkey characters evil in Masters of the Universe Classics, that we didn't have a good guy gorilla, threw off the balance, and it actually, I get it, because I'm an adult collector myself. We did have actually plans for a good guy gorilla, doing the red version of Gygor down the line, but it never happened. But I'm totally off track. We're here to talk about the giants. And the giants in Masters of the Universe Classics were about double the size of a regular standard 6-inch figure, which for those of you who are able to do elementary school math is about 12 inches. Well, it is 12 inches, 6 plus 6 equals 12, although it was more like 6.5 inches for a He-Man figure. And as I noted, Megator and his archenemy Titus formed that balance, that yin and yang of having a good guy giant and a bad guy giant. Because, giants need other giants to hit, I guess, or slug it out with. But it just made sense. And once we'd already done Titus, doing Megator was not that far off, especially because it was a big reuse of tooling. He had new hands and new legs, feet. But he used the legs, the arms, the most of, the body, etc. that came from the previously tooled Titus figure. And that's always a great way to get things through management when you're presenting them, because every SKU in MOTU Classics had to be presented individually. And one thing Megator had that Titus didn't have was an alternate head. And we're going to get to that. But unlike Titus, Megator didn't have a gigantic vacuum cleaner accessory, and that's how we were able to afford the head, because Megator's accessories was much smaller. No, it's not a vacuum cleaner. It's a tool to pick up action figures. So, quick history of the character, and this may be repetitive because, we're deep into the director's commentary, but Megator and Titus were originally part of the Powers of Grayskull line extension for 1987. This was going to take the battle back to Preternia, where Hero was going to battle against the Snake Men using dinosaurs, and their allies were going to be giants. So you could see some good guy giants and some bad guy giants in the background. Why are the bad guys always multicolored and the good guys are regular colored? All right, well, either way, so we had, green for the bad guy and we had Caucasian for the good guy. And, I guess maybe that helps you tell who's good and who's bad because, green is always bad. I don't know. But having giants was just, the next evolution in MOTU. In fact, giants were actually something that was concepted very early on. The original pitch for MOTU, one of the other competitive pitches, was a line of giants. And they had other giants in mind too, like a cyborg there. But at the end of the day, while the giant concept floated around for years, it wasn't until Powers of Grayskull that it came into the line. And because it came so late in the line, much like Laser Power, He-Man, and Laser Light Skeletor, Titus and Megator only had release overseas. You can see the video in the flag above talking about international distribution and how often tail line figures that come at the very end often only get shipped overseas because overseas markets, thank you, use a comma, often lag behind the US market by 1 to 2 years as far as both entertainment and product. So product that doesn't make it out to the US market often then gets shuffled off to European or South America or even Canadian markets. So the vintage packaging, which showed off the cool action features of the figures, never got to be enjoyed by US fans. Mostly Italy, I believe, was the market where these got released, but I know there's definitely stories of them showing up in different areas of the world and in different countries. And the original figure of Megator, should be noted, also had rooted hair. And while we didn't do rooted hair on Titus, doing the zombie head, which we're going to get to, was kind of an homage to this. It was the only rooted hair figure in the entire MOTU Classics line. And part of that was an homage to the original figure that had rooted hair, which by my definition, as I've noted in some previous videos, makes him a doll because he's got hair play. Well, I think he's more of an exception to the rule, kind of like that Spawn Malbolgia figure that had a little tuft of rooted hair coming out. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, Megator is a figure that was from the vintage line, even though he only got released in Europe. But because of the internet and as years have gone by, he's kind of become a cult figure. He did show up, of course, in the Mattel catalog, along with those aforementioned dinosaur toys, like Gigantosaurus here, that never got released. But you can see how big the giants were and how huge Megator was. And Gigantosaur. In fact, here he is next to, well, here's Titus at least, next to his MOTU Classics counterpart. And you can see the original ones were huge. They were like 14, 15 inches tall. And while we couldn't go that big for price point, we didn't want to put out a $100 figure. We honestly just did not feel comfortable that that price point was going to work. But, we kind of got to make them as big as we could. All right, so let's talk about that rooted hair and the zombie face that was the alternate head for Megator. This was not included in the vintage figure and deserves to be discussed. So much like all the other characters that we really wanted figures of, we tried to get everyone into the mini-comics in some way or another. So here in mini-comic number 2, you see Megator attacking a Gar village, and then later on in mini-comic number 3, you see the zombie version of Megator participating in the second Ultimate Battleground. And I actually remember this was one of the notes to the artist. We had to have them redo it to ensure it was the zombie version, because in the continuity, the zombie version was around during He-Man's time, and the regular version was around during Hero's time, or in Preternia, if you will. In fact, let's kind of get into that a little bit. So, while the Horsemen always knock it out of the park with sculpts, they really, they love getting to do zombies. What can I say? Like, when they can do monster characters, that tends to be when they really just drive it home. So where did this zombie idea come from? Well, it came from a concept I had in my head that I couldn't shake. So let's talk about the 2000X series and the Snake Men real quick. In the very last episode, the Snake Men turn tail and are banished to Subternia, which is the underground realms of Eternia. And there's all sorts of funky things happening underground. There's, Temple of Serpos, and you have Whiplash's people, and you have Rockmen, and a buried Gar spaceship, and Battle Bones there you could see at the bottom. So this idea for doing Megator as a zombie, honestly, it came out of this, I don't want to call it a vision, but a visual, that's a better way of putting it, a visual that I just could not get out of my head, that came to me when working on the Classics continuity and making sure it tied into the 2000X Mike Young series. It's explained in the bio for Megator that eventually, or inevitably, King Hiss, while wandering around Subternia, discovered the remains of Megator from the first Ultimate Battleground, from Preternia, the great battle of Heroes time, thousands of years ago. And for those who know the lore, the 3 towers sunk into the ground after the first Ultimate Battleground with the idea that they weren't going to rise again until they were needed for the second Ultimate Battleground. And I had this idea of King Hiss discovering the central tower underground, covered in rubble, and in the jaws was like an undead Megator who had been stuck in the jaws for thousands of years, and used his magic to basically reanimate him as a zombie giant to add to his horde of snake army. And that image, and pardon the fact that I just kind of Photoshop that together pretty quickly, that basically drove the direction to create this second head. I just could not get that image out of my mind of King Hiss and his Snake Men finding the undead Megator stuck in the jaws of Central Tower as it was dragged underground after the first Ultimate Battleground. So King Hiss befriends Megator, he releases him from the jaws, and now he's got he being King Hiss, has a giant ally in order to bring into the second ultimate battleground, when the towers were going to rise again. But he freed Megator from the jaws before the tower rose. So, that way he had him. And yeah, that was basically why we did the zombie head, because I had this insane image in my mind. And that's kind of what MOTU Classics was all about, was just doing a huge range of characters. From dentists to wizards to, bony old men. Giant green zombie Megator just felt like it fit in. And it also carried the figure forward and showed continuity. I always love the way toys can tell stories as a medium itself. And we weren't done with giants, which was great, because we had one more giant to get to. While we weren't going to do the cyborg robot giant from the concept art, we were going to do a stone giant, and he was my favorite. But that's a video for another time. I hope you've enjoyed this insight into Megator, and stick around. A lot more director's commentary is still to come. The line is only getting warmed up.